I have to do it to you, Jason. I have to ask you the most important question that's ever been asked in Grand Archive.
Yep.
I think you might kind of know what's coming just because
I
of
think
because
so.
of
I think
interactions.
so.
After playing in the first major Ascent event and keeping your deck list in mind, what rating would you give Quicksilver Grail out of 5 stars?
Oh man. Let's go on the Patreon, right?
Hey guys, it's Caban with True Champion Gaming, and I am joined here with fellow top 8 competitor from our very first Ascent Houston, Jason May, or you may know him as Limelight from Discord. And congratulations again, man. That's a huge accomplishment, and it was really cool to share that with you in the top 8. A lot of you may not actually know, but Jason coached and grinded with me for an entire day on my first real day of playing GA. There was a big TTS online tournament in the main Discord, and I had played a couple of games, but still was really trying to learn a lot. And Jason literally set me up with a deck list, gave me a whole deck to play, shared his own sauce, and just spent hours teaching me and training me how to play the game. So really appreciate that, man, and just attributes to what kind of community member you are. And we just all want to say thank you, and I'm just super happy to be doing an interview with you, man.
I appreciate that. And not to mention, when I first did meet you and I did sit with you, I knew straight away that you were passionate and that you would be pushing to play the game competitively because you were asking a lot of questions. Yeah. And obviously, look where you are now. You've done so well. So also congratulations for coming first.
Yeah, thank you so much.
The first Ascent as well.
So I'm going to just jump right into the questions because I'm sure we have a lot to talk about. And this is a really important question that I'm going to start with that I think maybe a lot of people don't even really think about, or at very least, they don't consider it enough. And my first question is going to be, what did your preparation look like in order to go to Ascent and feel like you were going to be confident?
It was a lot more than what people would think, and I think that it takes a lot more than what people think as well. I was probably playing 2 to 3 hours a day while working full time, and there was a lot of speed bumps. Thinking of if I should change decks, trying to think of iterations, trying to play the deck into competitive people, but not trying to play it everywhere where it's going to cause trouble where I'm just versing it. The problem with my deck was if there's 40 of us on the day, we all lose because we all just tie out. So definitely a lot of practice, but probably the hardest part of the practice was when we actually got to America, the actual Airbnb 5 days prior, we were playing 12 hours a day. So a very hard grind when we actually got to America.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. That's awesome to hear that. I actually didn't even know that you guys did that. So,
so it ended up being... There was three of us in the Airbnb and 2 were coming over. We all had different iterations of Win Merlin, so we would sit there and would just jam games. The only games we had were the Mirrors and Fire Eye, and Fire Eye smashes us.
Yeah.
And all we did was either play an hour and a half game or lose to the Fire Eye. But as we got closer to Ascent, we had some Fire Lorraines come in, and we were hey, Fire Lorraine, come over here, and we're just trying to force the Fire Lorraine to play us.
Man,
definitely a lot of practice.
What a grueling preparation to sit down and play the Mirror or your auto loss. But it obviously paid out really well for you. So that's awesome to hear. And I do want to say that, the bumps in the road, man, I absolutely felt those with you. And I think that's something really important to get over is because not giving up too early, right? I'm sure that there were moments where you're there's no way that I'm bringing this deck to Ascent. I absolutely also shared those. We're going to dive deeper into that, on our own team podcast with me, Isaac, and Terry on our Patreon exclusive podcast that we're pumping out soon. And also there is going to be a Patreon exclusive, extended interview with Limelight as well. So if you're a member, go get some extra questions from the man himself. But let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So I'm really curious, what made you decide on Win Merlin for the event?
So once Fracture Crown came out, I started with Win Merlin, and I realized the amount of, efficiency and effectiveness you can get from having cards like Ventus. It was a grind machine where if you let it do what it needs to do, it can probably beat anything. Just because you let it draw all its cards, it has all its answers. Ventus is an amazing card, probably one of the best cards in the set. So my options, I got to a point where I was either playing Wind Merlin or Fire Merlin, just for the sole reason that I believed that the same way that Wind Lorraine and Fire Lorraine were prominent, so would Merlin. Merlin would do the same thing, but better with the 410 Majestic Spirit as well. So my thought process was that if I got enough practice on the grindy Wind Merlin, then I could probably grind the games out. I was coming into Ascent believing it'd be a best of one for me, because I would probably need to either play a best of one, I'll probably win the best of one, not get to game 2, or like there was never going to be a best of 3 with this deck, just because does take a lot of time to play. It is its downfall, it's its profit and downfall as well, because if you obviously lose that best of one or that first game, you're then all of a sudden trying to like push in damage as fast as you can. So that's probably it. And just the amount of experience I had on it. I've been playing it since FTC release, so just been kind of grinding with that.
Makes sense. Yeah, I know that we heavily considered Wind Merlin as well. It was probably the next deck that I considered the most after the deck that we actually did bring. And I found the sideboard to be such an interesting experience, because at first I was like siding against everything, and then it got to a point where I was like, oh wait, I can't side for the mirror. I can't side for this matchup because it's not going to get past the game 1. And it's also really interesting to think, oh, but then people can't side against me for game 1, right? So it becomes this whole different like beast to think about, even deck building and stuff like that, much less playing alone at the event. And I know that what was your record in day 1? It was undefeated, but it was how many ties?
I ended up going 5 wins, 0 losses, 3 ties.
Phenomenal record, yeah.
Exactly. So it was the equivalent of 6-2.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a bumpy ride, because we started day 1. We tied game 1 into a windmill and mirror.
Wow.
They wanted the rise start. We then went into game 2. We won game 2. I think it was against a watermelon. Watermelon's probably our best matchup. And then game 3, we versed Ferrari, which is like my original Wind Lorraine deck. Yeah. And we tied again. So I ended up going into lunchtime with 1 win, 0 losses, 2 ties. Yeah. And if I was to lose or tie from there, I would have that was it. That was over. So very stressful times. Did go up to the room at lunchtime and have a hard lemonade, one of those vodka lemonades, and then I came back down more confident, and actually from there it was all smooth sailing. But definitely there was an iteration at some point at the Airbnb where I was actually running a Geist and a Crimson Trinket in main board for exactly what you just said. There was going to be no best of 2s. You were never going to be able to sideboard for the mirror. So I was like, why not just run the Crimson Trinket now? So then you can like just win that best of 1. But it ended up not being the final iteration. So we changed. I think we changed the deck like 12 times in the last 24 hours. It was pretty wild. We changed a lot of things. Yeah,
right before Ascent.
We were overcooking it, I think. We changed a lot of things. Like the Blanches weren't in there. The Asian Protectors weren't in there. But people are like, oh, the Rise start has a lot of aggro, does a lot of early damage. How do we do that? I'm like, all right, well, let's just put it in the Lorraine. Let's put Asians in. And it's like, well, how do we deal with the Rise? Well, let's just put Blanches in. And it became like this toolbox that had like all of this stuff, like just Jack of all trades, master of none. That's what it became at the end of the day.
That's super interesting. I didn't know that you guys had that many last minute changes. I mean, it's not unheard of to like feel like the meta shifted a little bit and be like, okay, I want to do this one side deck change or something like that. But to hear that many last minute changes is just wild. Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, my next question would be, being a big personality in the community and also traveling internationally for the event, like how did you feel about the pressure going into this tournament?
I like to have fun on Discord, a bit of banter. I talk a bit of shit. I talked us up a lot, so the pressure was probably even worse, because I was like, Australians are like, the Australian meta is more developed than the American meta. Obviously don't mean that like on a serious note, it's more of a fun thing, but it still brings that pressure that if we all get there and we all kind of just do nothing, then I'm going to get the brunt of it. Never traveled to America before, first time in America, so was very nerve-wracking. It was quite interesting actually. My run in Swiss, I didn't feel nerves. Like I was actually quite chill. Obviously, the lunchtime I was a bit upset, but when I got back and started winning, I was set. I only started feeling nerves, funnily enough, when I hit top 8, which is probably when you should lose nerves because you've made it. I got super nervous when I hit top 8.
Really? That is interesting.
Yeah, I got so nervous. I don't know why. Maybe because like it starts to become like this a big deal. Like there was a lot of money. And it's real as well. There's a lot of money involved. I got really nervous in the top 8. But no, it was like there was a lot of pressure. I did I did put a lot of faith in my teammate Yap, because like Yap, I believe, is a great player. He then did change to FireEye overnight. He was on
Overnight.
Windmerlin. Yeah, he was on
Wow.
Windmerlin.
Yeah.
He was on Windmerlin. Gaz smashed him like 3 times in a row on the Airbnb and pilled him, saying just go FireEye, and he changed overnight. And yeah, I've now had an apology from him after that happened. But I was like, man, like he should have just held on. But what he said was true. Like, he didn't want to play hour games for 14 hours. He didn't want to play.
Absolutely. I think
Like,
that
it's
was one of our
exhausting.
strengths, was like, yeah, like you had 3 draws in day 1 and you were undefeated. I mean, like that is a true thing. Like you didn't drop a match, right? Like, but Terry was undefeated 8-0 in day 1 and he was taking 20, 30-minute breaks in between each round because we were on such an aggressive deck, such a fast-paced deck. It's like you had a mental reset after every single round, which is really important. Yeah, and like that was one of the things that tossed me off of when Merlin was wanting a mental reset, and also because I had pressure to like also help our team with Path of Silver, but also like I had a similar experience where I just sat down and lost like 17 times against Rye, and I was like, I can't bring this deck, dude. Like,
yeah, exactly right.
Yeah,
it was horrible. And the funny thing was, one of the judges, Remedic, love him. He came up to me. He's like, "Oh, Amy's in a way better," because my wife also made top 32. Congratulations to her.
Absolutely.
He came up and he's like, wow, you know, Amy's in such a better position than you. And I'm like, we're both like equivalent to 6'2". Like, we're actually in the same position. And he's like, but she's had like 3 hours off. You've had 0 hours off. I'm like, that's fair enough. She's had a lot more break time than me. She got to go and experience the shop. I had to get people to get me playmats, because I would literally finish my round, go to the bathroom, come back, and like it's already the next round. I had 0 time.
Pairing's already posted.
Yeah, it
Must
was
have
crazy.
been a grueling day 1.
It was very, very stressful day 1. But yeah, so definitely pressure from being a personality in the community. But, you know, once the other Aussies kind of fell out, I had to kind of throw it on my back and just climb that mountain, which I tried to do. So,
I mean, you absolutely did, dude. Like, it was a phenomenal finish by you guys. And it was really cool to see Amy in day 2 with you as well.
Yeah.
That was really awesome for you guys.
It was very happy. Yeah.
So yeah, what changes, if any, would you make to the list after playing it for 13 rounds at Ascent?
It sounds kind of crazy, right? But like, I'm one to cook. I overcook things. I'm very spicy. I feel as though favorable wins and swift recruit actually were not as influential as I wanted them to be. It feels like with the deck, it feels like you build a game, early game, with like AC and swift recruits, favorable wins, but then your whole plan is to rush 3 anyway, so they normally become fodder and end up dead in your hand, which is really interesting because win decks have always held swift recruit, favorable wins that like they're a must have. I actually feel like there is ways that they don't fit the list. Star Wars Shieldmate does more than enough. You're not using floating memory, like FTC Brain, you just never had floating in the drop. So there's probably a world where they actually come out, probably Swift Recruit comes in against aggro. But even then, like, Swift Recruit didn't even, like, when I versed the Fire Xander in top 32, Swift Recruit didn't really do much. I had Shieldmates out, and I was, like, just trying to kill their board. So probably changes would be Swift Recruit's out, Favorable's out. We probably put Blanches into the sideboard, although they're cool in the main board. It's just like it's a card. Fire Eye's gonna kill you anyway, and Fire Merlin, you're favored anyway. The problem I had in the top 8 card is like, so I felt very confident in Fire Merlins all day. I beat, I think, 4 Fire Merlins. There's a lot of Fire Merlins.
Wow.
I then went into the top 8 and I versed Pickle Sword on his Fire Merlin, and I've got like 2 Blanches in hand, but his Slay the King for like 9 damage, physical damage. It's like, this Blanche is useless. Like, he killed me without Fireballs, so they were actually a dead card. But yeah, probably those 2 cards. I would say I would love to fit Slay the King in. That was such a good card to verse. It was very eye-waking because being able to, like, you know, Pickle was able to draw like 10 cards on me and then Slay the King, my Pendragon, like giving him a momentum swing, but then also bring a Tithe out all at once. So it's like, okay, he's Beseech the Winds, 4 damage Beseech the Winds that kills my ally, brings a Tithe out, and he's got 10 cards and I've got nothing. Was such a prominent play. So, you know, I would love to probably try and put that card in. I do feel like Win Merlin, even after this, is probably in a great spot. I think that it's still probably a top 3 deck. I just think that as long as aggro pushes Rye out, it's probably in the spotlight. But as you said earlier, like Rye is such a bad matchup. It's probably like an 80-20 matchup.
Yeah.
Just because you know, your engine takes 20 minutes to get started, and then they're already online and just blow you out. So it's good as long as Rye's kind of out of the fixture. But yeah, I'd probably change the early game, seeing as I'm rushing DG anyway.
Sure.
My plan.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. And yeah, it is interesting because we'll probably start to get into a meta where our deck, the heavy rush deck, becomes a little bit more popular since it got not only first and second, but another top spot in the whole top 8. So people are going to be thinking, oh, well, that's best deck in format, like hands down. And then they're going to probably push out more of the Rise. So if you can build your list to kind of handle that deck a little bit better, then yeah, it puts you in a really good spot for sure.
It's really interesting. It's really interesting as well. Like so I went to locals last night. I don't know why I'm crazy. Like I'm going to locals still. I went on a water sylvie for fun. Yeah. But the locals that aren't very competitive, they were like, oh, like surely they're going to ban Phalanx Captain, and they're going to ban like the deck doesn't need any bans. There's no bans that are needed on that deck. Like it is actually, it's a good deck, but it's not like a game-breaking broken deck. It was played perfectly into the right meta. No one respected a sweep. No one respected any cleaves. You know, so like I honestly believe that like Avarice and things like that might still get hit anyway, even though there was probably only 2 in the top 8.
It was 3 out of 8 of the top 8 decks, I think, were Crux Element running the Ascensions and the Avarice and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, not even 50%, but there were quite a lot in top 32 though. Yeah,
I do feel as though so the situation now is very interesting because you've now got to go. I don't need to build a deck to beat your deck. I need to build a deck to beat the deck that's going to beat your deck.
Yeah.
So I need to figure out what people are going to build to try and beat Wind Allies, and I need to try and find a deck that will be favored into Wind Allies and also be favored into, I'm guessing it's going to be a Lorraine level 2 of some sort that does some form of sweep. That's the next step in regards to like and that's what I love about, like, I mean, you're obviously the same, Caban, like you love the meta call and the build of it, where it's like you've got to figure out what's this and what's that, what to bring. It's like different racing cars. It's like, all right, well, it's raining today, so let's take this car. And that's how I feel with this as well. It's like now, as soon as the ban and restrictions is in 9 days, or as of recording 9 days, as soon as that comes out, I'm back to the grind chamber, try to figure out what's going on. Especially because I won't be going to Ascent Auckland, but I have my teammates that will. So I'll just become like the training dummy.
The coach.
It's like, yeah,
for sure.
So it should be fun.
Speaking about, preparing for the next event, my next question would be, like, what do you feel like you learned from the whole Ascent experience? Not only, like, the actual tournament itself, but, like, your preparation. Do you feel like you could have changed anything about that? Your actual tournament experience, even, like, playing a more aggro deck to give yourself more time in between rounds, or even, honestly, like, the post-Ascent experience, you know? Like, is there anything that you felt like this event happened and you afterwards were like, oh, I need to change that part of the process, or that would have been nicer to do differently?
It's a weird spot because obviously the deck that I was on is strong, but I hated that it was like I had to win the best of one. You know, those ties I would win the best of one. There'd be like 25 minutes left. They would then like smash down, and they would like actually just push me out of game 2. They'd beat me with about 5 minutes left, and then I'm forced to tie. I hated that. But then thinking about it, like if I'm to sit here and say I'd play a faster deck, what deck would I play, and how would it go into like the meta, right? Like if I play like aggro is very interesting, where it's like hit or miss. If you hit someone that just has a good sweep, you just kind of lose. So what would I do differently? Probably make the early game more aggressive. I didn't have phalanxes in my main. Kind of crazy. I probably should have had a scenario where I can just go wide early and then like kind of move into Ascension late. Probably get more sleep than I did. We had the Australian Football League Grand Final, so it was like the Super Bowl for our football league. It was on 11 p.m. the night before, and it finished at 2 a.m. And it was my team versus Amy's team, so we had to watch it. Like we would have been at the actual event. I think 98,000 in attendance at that event, so it was like huge. But I was up till 2 a.m. watching that. We won, so Amy wasn't too happy. But you know, probably get a good night's sleep, not go to sleep at 2-3 a.m. But Yeah, all these little things like of prepping. It's, as I said, it's my first event where I've like traveled that far for like a big experience event. Probably had a lot of things to learn, a lot more prepping. Probably not with the mirrors. Issue we had is we had our own little like, I guess, meta environment that wasn't the actual environment, and that's probably led players to believe that Rye was a good pick when it wasn't. Even though I did say to everyone it's going to be a room full of aggro, the Ryes probably gained unnecessary confidence by versing the Wind Merlins, then to figure out there was no Wind Merlins in the room. So it's probably our fault to not, like, in hindsight, figure out that that's probably what's happening in our very room. But other than that, like, yeah, I guess I should find a deck that is faster. Because, yeah, it was, as you said, very grueling to play non-stop and not take a break. My brain was kind of rattled for most of it. So,
but yeah, I mean, like, and I didn't mean to ask that in a way that's like, would you play an aggro deck, I guess? Like, because, like, for all we know, True Champion Gaming might be on literally Win Merlin for Auckland. Who knows, right? Like, we can't tell that yet. And so I think there's definitely, like, a reason to play control decks as well, because especially if you put in the work for it like you did, you still got top 8 with it. Like, if you brought our deck, maybe you would have not even made day 2, right? Who knows? So it's like, I don't think that it was necessarily like the wrong pick or anything remotely close to that. But I was just kind of curious to hear your thoughts on like the preparation and like during the tournament and all that stuff. But
I also think, and like I kind of agree with what was said in the fact that, like, if you put enough reps, let's say if you put enough reps into like a Fire Xander deck, you could probably still get there, and I'd probably have 3-4 hours to spare.
Sure.
So I think that, because, like, obviously skill is the most important thing in card games, but in a scenario where you're playing not only your opponent but the clock as well, like, that is stressful. Like, I can play perfectly and still tie a game with Wind Merlin, which doesn't sound like it's a safe option at the end of the day. And in hindsight, I probably could have found something or worked on something that maybe was a little bit more consistent in the way that I didn't have to deal with the timer. Because, yeah, the last thing you want to do is play a game perfectly and lose the time, right? So that's probably like my hindsight. Not that aggro probably is the choice, but, like, you probably want to find a deck that plays within 60 minutes, right? Like, those top 8 games, I could have just sat there with those top 8 games for probably 2 hours and played it out. Like, it does take a long time to play the game, and it's not like one of the judges to me was like, oh, in top 8 you've got unlimited time, but, like, just play faster, because it's like, we don't want it to go over an hour and a half. And it's not even that I play slow. Like, people who have played with me know I actually play quite quickly. It's the fact that it's like, play a spell, move a counter up, move a counter up, move a level counter up, draw. Like, your turn takes forever because of how much interaction you have to do. The deck has just non-stop interaction. And because of that, it takes time. And then if you're versing a player like a Watermelon or someone who does take time with their turns as well, you are pretty much screwed. Like, it is something you got to worry about.
And when you reach that top cut and you're pitting 2 players that are probably not making as many mistakes as some other players would, like, you don't have as many mistakes to capitalize on. Neither player does. So, I mean, even me and my brother-in-law, Isaac, we took, I think, an hour and 45 or an hour and 50 minutes to play our finals, and we were both on an aggro deck, technically. And, it changes because, like, in that matchup, in that mirror, it becomes a little bit more of a control mirror, but it's still, like, that's a very long match, right? Like, if we were in Swiss, we would not have finished that match. So it will be interesting to see if, like, maybe GA does have an answer to this, to the fact that so many players have to be so aware of the clock, whether you're a fast or slow player. But it's definitely not an easy solution to come up with, because I don't think anyone in the community wants this game to go to a best of 1 situation. Because I think the best of 3 is really healthy for the game, and you can't make rounds 2 hours long, because then otherwise we're talking about a whole week long event for Ascent, right? And, like, that's just not feasible. So we'll have to see, like, kind of what happens there. But we're gonna end the video with one last question. Unless you are watching this on Patreon, we'll have extra questions there, so definitely feel free to go check that out. And that is just, are there any shoutouts that you want to do?
Definitely. So we'd love to obviously shout out Weaves of the Shore for running an amazing event, Yeti Games for TOing an amazing event. Would love to shout out obviously yourself, Caban, for having me on the video, and the True Champion Gaming. Love Terry, love Isaac. Would love to obviously shout out my teammates, so Gaz, Yap, Geo, Amy, and Byfall. And the guys who helped me with the deck as well. So we had a lot of work from Benton, Alex Sneed, myself, an enemy. We all kind of worked together very hard in the last week and kind of pushed through. So I'd like to thank everyone for kind of helping me out. And yeah, it was an amazing experience. So I really hope to see everyone in Ontario. That's my plan.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks guys so much for joining us. Until next time. Peace.
Ciao.